Welcome everyone back to the Madhouse, the only place where geopolitical insanity gets translated into plain English, sarcasm and mild emotional damage. Tonight's episode is basically a guided tour through everything that's quietly falling apart, starting with a man who's just spent a month in the functioning country and now is being deported soon back to Britain like a cultural prisoner exchange. Michael from Buhanka Watch. From there we'll move through the political system that offers voters as much as a real choice as a supermarket meal deal. A society slowly learning to shout at itself instead of fixing anything. A European legal system that now punishes opinions faster than it used to punish crimes. A lightning raid in Caracas that magically wasn't about oil while absolutely being about oil. And finally, a story involving intelligence agencies, nuclear deterrence, and enough alleged behaviour to keep lawyers awake at night. If you came for calm reassurance, you're in the wrong place. If you came for uncomfortable truths served with sarcasm and a sense of impending absurdity, welcome home. Let's begin. Alright, it's time. Michael has just spent a full month in Belarus eating real food, walking through functioning cities, experiencing winter that actually gets handled, and discovering that sanctions apparently forgot to work. Unfortunately for him, he's soon going to be deported back to the UK, a place powered entirely by QR codes, apology announcements, and emotional damage. So tonight we're not doing the polite questions, we're doing emotional preparation for re-entry into Western absurdity. Michael, this is your intervention.
I don't want to leave. Believe me, I might claim asylum.
Oh, claim asylum.
Yeah. So,
So anyway, this is your third trip to Belarus. At what point do immigration just stop stamping your passport and hand you apartment keys?
Hopefully sooner rather than later. There might be plans in motion.
Okay.
Very much. Hope there might be ambitions and plans being put into motion.
Okay. So let's be honest. Which shocked you more? How normal Belarus actually is, or how aggressively abnormal the UK has quietly become?
I'd always known that Belarus was just from my autistic readings, I always known that Belarus was a fairly functional, ordered society. So I wasn't too surprised. There's some parts that did surprise me, just how well it functions, but I was more just in awe of as a Slavophile coming here and experiencing the dynamics of the place. But I mean, the absurdity and the abnormality of Britain is, the only problem is it really abnormal these days? All Western countries seem to be pretty much in the same boat, doing the exact same things. But for me, it is Belarus is so poor. This poor Eastern European backwater no one's ever heard of, and it's the last dictatorship in Europe, and it's under, apart from Russia, the most sanctioned country in the world, and all this stuff. And you come here and it's like, but how come everything works? How come the food's so good? How come people live pretty decent, I'd say pretty more European lives than most Europeans would in their capital cities, whereas Britain is meant to be this rich world power, all this stuff, and the place barely functions, nothing works, the country is in constant decline. So it just tells me, well, I've always kind of been skeptical of the whole idea, as long as GDP goes up as society gets better. Well, the economy here is maybe 100 times smaller apparently on paper than it is in Britain, but yeah, I'd say people live so much better. So much better. After
a month of affordable food, working infrastructure, and people who don't scream at each other in supermarkets, do you feel like you're about to voluntarily re-enter a psychological experiment called modern Britain?
In many ways, I think this place, I grew up in Northern Ireland, which has its own sort of peculiarities with bits in Germany and England, but in many ways Belarus reminds me of Britain in the 1990s. It's hard to quantify exactly how or why, but one thing, as you say, people don't shout at each other. I like that people are more reserved here. It reminds me of what British people used to be like, or British people still are, but of course, New Britons that we're being replaced with for something different. But It's gonna be so depressing. The dark clouds I can already see forming.
Did you ever feel once oppressed here, or did you mostly feel free to walk around without being lectured by signs, screens, and public announcements?
No, I felt probably far more freedom here than I do back in Britain. Health and safety doesn't seem to be a thing. So I mean, if you walk, I could, if I wanted, I could walk across the train tracks. I've got run over. My fault. We went up the Mound of Glory about an hour and a half ago. Snow, ice, everything. Still, you went up it. Britain, that would have been closed off. As we were saying, the TV displays there probably would have been stolen or stripped for copper wiring. It just feels a lot more common sense here. A lot of common sense. People just get on with what they do. You see, like the only thing that I'd say, I wouldn't even say it's repressive or anything like that. If anything, I actually think it's kind of a good social filter to filter out people who would not function in society, is how strict they are on the traffic lights here. If the light is red, even if the street's empty, you don't cross it, and you only cross it when it's green. But like I say, might be a little bit annoying whenever you're stuck outside and you're about to cross to get into your apartment, and then all of a sudden there's a lot of snow and ice and you're to stand there for another minute. But like I say, I would imagine the social filter alone that would produce, people who can't even appear to that very basic standard of society, I think that's a very good way to filter out such people. And so now the internet seems to be a lot freer. There's websites I can go on here that I can't go on in Britain. I can see a lot more tweets here, whereas in Britain, it'd be blocked due to local laws, blocked due to laws in the EU plus European countries, have to verify your age, stuff like that, all that bullshit you see on X. Here, just completely open the view. If anything, I feel much freer here than I do back home in the home of the free, as we are told.
That's true. Western media told us sanctions would turn Belarus into a Mad Max with potatoes. Instead, you found full shells, normal prices, and functioning logistics. Who should issue the apology tour? Journalists or experts? In the West.
In the West. Well, they're all just dickheads. Really, I just... Apology tour, well, I mean, there's so much more I think they could apologize before it comes to this place, but I mean, it just kind of tells this idea that sanctions were just going to, I haven't been to Russia as such yet and seen what's there, but I can't imagine it's much different here. But I mean, every block, we were sort of half complaining about it in the cars, just every block, is there's a new massive mall. They're all well stocked. Some of the foods in there as well, I'd never see in Britain. Selection seems to be better in Britain. The food quality is just better, it seems to be in Britain. Western brands, bit more expensive than the other stuff, and probably more expensive than you would get back in Britain. Well, it would very much depend on the product, but yeah, it's just if anything, I'd say Belarus seems to be booming rather than anything. As we were saying, is for a country whose population is declining, there's buildings going up everywhere, new apartment blocks, renovations. It's insane.
Yeah, no, it is. Who's buying them?
Yeah.
Under sanctions, Belarus somehow managed to stock shops, build roads, heat cities, and keep life moving. Meanwhile, Britain can't build a train station without a decade of consultations. Who's actually sanctioned here?
Well, I'd say Britain's more hamstrung itself via legislation, laws, environmental legislation, just every kind of local councils. I think Britain's just completely hamstrung itself, whereas here I think if the government decides that this is for public good, or if the government decides this is going through, it's going through in spades, getting to the dirt sooner rather than later. So I would say the functionality of state here works a lot better than Britain, where the state just doesn't seem to function at all unless you're a foreign migrant, or someone who's not British but you need a passport or you need accommodation. Then the British state seems to function extraordinarily well for you, but for everyone else and for anything else, it doesn't seem to function at all.
What product here made you stop and think, why is this somehow easier to buy in a sanctioned country than in Britain?
What product here? Well, I'm not a big drinker, but I'd say alcohol. Yes, yeah. Actually, come to think of it, more alcohol. Yeah. Um, Go into the McDonald's variant here, Mac by BY, KFC, and in the fast food places, they'll serve you beer. There won't be a bouncer outside of it on a Friday or a Saturday night. There won't be fights outside of it. Um, any restaurant, pretty much any shop here, you can get alcohol, and it's extraordinarily cheap. But yeah, I'd say alcohol, whereas alcohol is just being kind of priced and legislated in Britain to just an absurd degree. And here, at least not that I've seen. I've definitely seen some people who are a little bit soused, but in general, is like they don't do drinking like they do in Britain. Here is, you don't have the fighting, you don't have the social discord that comes with it. Like I say, I don't see bouncers in front of the KFC on a Friday night in this country, whereas in London, of course, it's kind of a mandatory, perhaps only the only country in Britain where you might see McDonald's having higher bouncers. But yeah, and again, I think it's just down to the idea that there is a set of rules and laws in this country, and that what's accepted is accepted. But if you can't even maintain, if you're an aggressive drunk, if you're fighting while you're drunk, well, either you stop getting drunk or you're punished for it. And I don't want to say removed from society, because it sounds quite extreme, but you're basically put in the penal colony until you sort yourself out. So yeah, it's if you can't maintain the very basic standards of the society here, then yeah, you're not going to survive here. And like I say, I don't really drink very much, and I get a sense that probably a lot of there's probably a very strong divide in Belarusians, where you'll have the ones who are like the the stereotype Russian alcoholic kind of thing, but then I also think there's probably a lot of them who just don't drink at all. But even then, the ones who have been drunk, that I've experienced, they all seem to be quite jolly, or they know
happy drunks.
Yeah.
Yeah. How many British narratives collapsed for you personally this month? Give us a rough body count.
Well, to be fair, I've completely kind of just zoned out of British news cycle. I've only checked the news back there maybe once or twice since I've been here, so God knows what they're saying back there. I mean, I think that Egyptian Al-Fatah thing happened while I was here, but I mean, even in Britain, I just know the government constantly lies to us. I don't believe anything the British government says. So I mean, what is there to collapse whenever I know anything they say to us is inherently a lie to begin with? So,
watching how winter actually gets handled here, snow cleared, heating working, transport moving, did it feel like witnessing a lost ancient civilization called competent governance?
Yes. Again, just how basic, even the most basic aspects of state function here. Fresh coating of snow, municipal workers are out clearing it, shoveling it off. Every morning, if it wasn't snowing, you'd see people out clearing up any litter or even just brushing the streets. Lots of tractors and heavy vehicles going around clearing off the big snow banks. And I'm just thinking, I could not picture a single council in London or in Britain that would do that. Again, like council workers who go on strike for health and safety and better pay to work in the snow and all this kind of stuff. And I mean, I think you were in London whenever I was in London in 2017, winter 2017, whenever they had the snow. Just this light bit of sleet, the city just ground to a halt. I'd hear like there's basically a blizzard out there right now as we're speaking, and the city's functioning perfectly, as you wouldn't even know there was snow.
So if Britain handled winter the way Belarus does, as we said, snow cleared, heating stable, transport moving, would half the UK political class immediately lose their excuse industry?
The problem is, for Britain to function as half well as this place, is pretty much the entire political class would have to be purged in Britain, because it just couldn't with the people in charge. Trade unions will have to go, health and safety legislation will have to go, and of course most of the political class in Britain are just hooked up to this kind of stuff. So it's just, if Britain was to function even half as well as this place, I could not envisage anyone in British politics really at the moment, apart from maybe a select few who would have to go for it to be the case.
If you opened a pop-up Belarus appreciation booth in London, how long before it was shut down for public safety reasons?
Depends where I did it, and I guess it'll depend if like all the crazy like ultra pro Ukrainian, the left wing liberal Belarusian exiles found out about it and came to harass me. But I love this country. I've fallen in love with it. I adore it. I love the people. I'd definitely sing its praises back home, but I don't feel it would be my place to sort of, host a booth saying "Come to Belarus" kind of thing. But I've definitely recommend people to do it. But yeah, I can imagine, who knows, whenever I go for the airport next, maybe I'll be taken aside and asked, well, why am I going to this ultimate bastion of evil?
That'll be a good video.
Yeah.
After eating real bread, real dairy, and meals that don't taste like regulatory paperwork, how emotionally prepared are you to go back to the beige British cuisine?
Well, this is... See, I like a lot of British cuisine. What I like... Well, there's some things here that... Well, most foods here are far better than what you get in Britain. But there is a couple of caveats.
Because the GMO's not allowed.
Yeah.
Dyes aren't allowed.
Everything's
a
organic.
lot of preservatives aren't allowed.
So the milk is superb here. I love the milk. But I miss cheese. Maybe I need to go to a proper artisan cheesemongers. But I do love my cheddar, my mature cheddars. And the cheddar that I've found here, it's a very mild cheddar. Bristly tossed cheddar. I think it's actually more of a red Leicester, going by the color of it. So I am missing my cheese. And bread's a bit hit and miss. I do miss, the white bread, sandwich bread you get in Britain, your Hovis and kind of stuff like that. They don't really do that. The closest thing they do here is like an American sandwich bread, and it's awful, terrible stuff. But like the Belarusian bread, some of the loaves quite nice, but not quite good for sandwiches in the way I'd make it. But generally, other than that, like the meats, the pastries, everything else here is just it's so much better, so much more divine. Just the cheese. I just need to learn how to make a good cheddar.
We'll have to find you some cheese.
Yeah.
On a scale of 1 to delete my browser history, how excited are you to leave Belarusian food behind and reunite with UK's supermarket sadness?
Delete the browser history.
If you had to smuggle one Belarusian thing back to the UK without customs noticing, what are you risking arrest for?
A permanent residence card. But I'd like to... I see these nice big ornate bottles of Soviet brand vodka. I would just... I'll probably never drink it, but it's the kind of thing I'd like to take home. But hopefully the Lithuanians do not destroy all the pastries and stuff that I'm hoping to smuggle back.
Put UK stickers on them.
Yeah.
You've experienced women who still believe in reality, family, femininity, and eye contact. Let's address the forbidden topic. After a month around Belarusian women, how doomed does UK dating culture feel by comparison?
Well, I'm not really in the dating scene at all. There are some British, but in general, I would just find British and Irish women boorish. And then here they, not that I'm Mr. especially as I'm looking now, Mr. Chad or anything, but the women here are just so much better presented and well kept than anything you'd really see in Britain.
Women are women here.
Yes. Yeah, well, like I say, a lot of, there are exceptions, of course. There's always exceptions, and there's some very well-to-do, well-kept British women and stuff. But generally, just the quality of women in Britain and Ireland, Northern Ireland, are just they're very boorish, and I just don't really have an interest in that at all. If anything, maybe that's I'm just here to get a green card.
When you land back in the UK and see the first self-checkout meltdown, security announcement, or inclusive signage initiative, how long before your regret physically manifests?
Almost immediately. I think the second I cross the border. I think I'll claim asylum at the border.
Yeah. Did you ever seriously consider accidentally missing your return flight and becoming mysterious telegram-based potato analysis?
Fortunately, I have to go back and earn money. And I'm trying to be very studious about following the regulations here, because I do not want to, I plan to come back to this country a lot, So I don't plan on overstaying my allowance or anything at all. So I'm very studious. As much as I'd like to maybe disappear out into the forest, but here very much I try to keep on board with everything.
How quickly after returning will you start planning trip number 4, like a recovering addict?
I think I already am kind of already planning it.
Okay.
Maybe with some friends.
Okay, what's the single thing you're going to miss the most here, and what's the first thing that's guaranteed to instantly annoy you when you get back to Britain?
Many things, but I guess the thing most personal would probably be heat. I like being able to go into the apartment and not have to turn on a switch and measure out like how much gas or whatever I'm using. I'd know that, okay, whenever I go back, the apartment's going to be hot. Probably a bit too hot whenever I'm sleeping. If I go into any shop, if I even go into the metro, it's going to be warm. Whereas whenever I go back home, the thing is, it'll probably be warmer back home in relative, but it's, whenever you're sitting in your apartment, it's like two above, and you're freezing. I'm having to, because it just costs so much. It's just such a rip off back home. So probably for the next few months it'll be heating until the summer starts to come around. But other than that, just in general, that I just feel in general happier here. Back home, it's just always like this weight. It's hard to explain what it is, but I just don't really feel happy there. Here, that weight isn't present, whatever it is. I always feel like there's something to do, people to meet, something to explore, and I know it's more readily available without being mugged, stabbed, have to pay £50 to get there, that kind of stuff.
Serious question. How long before you stop calling these trips visits and start calling them extraction missions from the West?
Well, I mean, I have kind of described this latest one as I've basically left Britain to trial living abroad. So it's already happened.
If Belarus kidnapped you and refused to let you leave, how long before you stop resisting and asked for better internet and more dumplings?
Just basically, I wouldn't resist.
Final question. How many more trips before Buhanka Watch quietly opens a permanent Minsk bureau and you defect with a camera, a coat, and very strong opinions on bread?
Work in progress. Might take years, but work in progress.
Okay. Michael, it's been an absolute pleasure psychologically destabilising you before your return to Britain. We wish you safe travels when you do go, delayed trains, flavourless food, and smooth re-entry into the land of QR codes and emotional support paperwork.
Flavourless, I mean, like a cheese and gravy chip is full of flavour.
Okay. Let's send this man home before he accidentally defects on live television. Thank you for surviving Belarus, and good luck surviving the UK. If you need an emergency evacuation, we'll organise a potato-based extraction within 72 hours. Thank you.
Always happy to, Dave.
Wow. That's what I call around the world news in 80 seconds. Let's kick off the global theatre of the absurd. First up, Trump has taken historical tourism to a whole new level. Apparently, because some Danes once had a boat in Greenland 500 years ago, that means he now thinks the US should own an entire Arctic island. Yes, really, Trump is still talking wild about buying or taking Greenland, whether they like it or not. History class doesn't give you land rights, but apparently Trump's Twitter feed does. In the UK, the government quietly set aside £200 million to get British troops prepared for potential deployment in Ukraine, which is basically the British Defence Minister saying, just in case we end up in a war, here's some more gear. Like buying extra batteries for a flashlight after the house is already on fire. Meanwhile, Russia decided to sprinkle a little fear into everyone's breakfast cereal by firing a nuclear-capable hypersonic missile into Ukraine near the Polish border, the Oreshnik. Hitting a major aviation repair plant, with what was described as 36 MIRVs. Nothing says international community come together like exploding missiles next door. Eyewitness footage indicates serious damage to the MiG-29 repair hub. Back in the Middle East, Iran's protests are heating up again as demonstrators defy brutal crackdowns, journalists get snatched up, and parliamentary goons roll through the streets like an unwanted encore. There's definitely unrest and definitely too many headlines featuring security forces, but not enough featuring peace. Verified reports from journalists are being detained as the government sends in armed units. In the Middle East, but not that Middle East, the UAE has decided that the UK is a hotbed of Islamist radicalisation. Yes, the same UK that gave us afternoon tea and indecipherable trains now gets a foreign state saying no thanks, and then cutting funding to UAE students there. Pack your bags and your feelings. Over the US, politics with global consequences. Republican Anna Paulina Luna is threatening to sanction Britain itself if Prime Minister Starmer bans X in the UK. Talk about turning the meme platform into a diplomatic incident. This would be a full-blown tech Cold War with tariffs and sanctions. Yes, Republicans are fighting British censorship with more sanctions. Genius. On the Caribbean front, the US forces have seized multiple oil tankers linked to Venezuela's industry. Now that the Venezuelan president has been captured or kidnapped, Trump claims they're prepping for a second stage of Venezuela operation, but then has also kind of said it's not necessary. So plot twist or backtracking, you decide. And here in snowy Belarus, Mother Nature wasn't impressed with the rest of the world. A massive snowstorm buried the country under almost a metre of snow. President Lukashenko was literally out shoveling it himself and asked citizens to join him, like it's a civic group project gone cold. And that's around the world in 80 seconds. Chaotic, confusing, dramatic, and absolutely burning. Stay tuned. Now that we've emotionally destabilised Michael from Buhanka Watch, let's destabilise the entire British political system. Because apparently Britain now runs elections the way airlines run seating upgrades. Lots of promises, very little actual choice. And everyone somehow still ends up in the middle seat next to the screaming child. This is the part where voters keep asking for change and Westminster keeps offering slightly different fonts on the same policy document. Let's talk about the illusion of representation and why democracy now feels like a subscription service nobody remembers signing up for. So welcome to modern Britain, where elections happen occasionally, choices are mostly decorative, and the political class operates like a rotating cast in the same badly written soap opera. New faces, same script, same disasters, slightly different hashtags. The problem isn't just Brexit fatigue or who forgot to mute their microphone in Parliament this week. It's a deeper crisis of representation. Large numbers of voters keep saying what they want. Lower pressure on houses, controlled migration, functioning public services, less cultural lunacy, and maybe a foreign policy that doesn't feel copy-pasted from Washington. And Westminster keeps delivering vibes, slogans, and another consultation. British politics has quietly drifted from public service to performance art. MPs now spend more time networking with lobbyists, NGOs, think tanks and media producers than speaking to actual humans who pay council tax. Elections give voters about 12 seconds of leverage every 5 years. Then the system politely returns to ignoring them like a forgotten WhatsApp message. Disagreement, meanwhile, isn't treated as democracy anymore. It's treated as a personality disorder. Raise concerns about migration, crime, housing pressure or cultural cohesion, and you're not debated, you're diagnosed. Congratulations, citizen, you've been morally labelled. The real comedy is how similar the major parties have become. They're sprinted so hard toward the political middle that they basically merge into a single managerial organism. Different rosettes, identical spreadsheets. Politics stops being a contest of ideas and becomes a musical chairs tournament for professional administrators. When voters get bored of the same tune, along comes the populists, which in elite means people the establishment doesn't like but voters keep voting for anyway. Apparently democracy is only acceptable when the public chooses an improved option. Anything else requires emergency panels and concerned editorials. Migration then pours petrol on the mood, not because migration is automatically bad, but because chaos, weak enforcement, hotel accommodation headlines, and cultural tension make people feel like nobody is steering the bus. Add in the moral hierarchy where some groups are permanently protected and others permanently suspect, and you've got resentment fermenting like a forgotten science project. Foreign policy doesn't help. Britain increasingly behaves like a loyal side character in someone else's movie. America sets the tone, Britain nods enthusiastically, and sovereignty becomes a branding exercise. Venezuela today, somewhere else tomorrow. Same moral script, same righteous speeches, same strategic awkwardness. Russia policy is the ultimate frozen loop, permanent villain, zero flexibility, dissent treated like treason. If the war ends in something less than a Hollywood victory, there's going to be a spectacular accountability blackout. Meanwhile, Britain talks like a heavyweight power, while quietly operating on lightweight infrastructure, shrinking military depth, and an economy built on services in a world getting nastier, more fragmented, and more energy-hungry by the week. Add AI eating white-collar jobs, and suddenly the optimism brochure catches fire. The real risk isn't chaos, it's stagnation disguised as stability. A system that can't hear uncomfortable truths eventually gets corrected in the hard way. Britain isn't broken because people disagree. It's broken because disagreement has been professionally outsourced to public shaming. And history suggests that never ends politely. And when people stop feeling represented, they don't suddenly become calm, rational, and emotionally fulfilled. Shocking, I know. Instead, society starts quietly fragmenting into tribes, bubbles, grievances, and neighbourhoods that increasingly look at each other like other competing football firms. This is where politics becomes boring and starts becoming spicy in the wrong way. Let's talk about Britain's slow drift towards low-intensity internal chaos. No muskets, no uniforms, just vibes, resentment, and petrol stations nervously sweating. Once upon a time, the idea of Britain drifting towards anything resembling internal conflict would have sounded like something only shouted by a bloke in a pub after his fifth warm lager. And yet, congratulations, a 2024 survey casually revealed that about 1/3 of the population now thinks some form of civil war is either likely or very likely or highly likely. Nothing says national confidence quite like statistical anxiety. Now, before anyone starts polishing muskets or reenacting Oliver Cromwell in their garden, modern civil war doesn't look like neat lines of redcoats and heroic speeches. It looks messier, smaller, meaner, low-intensity chaos, sporadic violence, intimidation, no-go zones, social media outrage mixed with actual petrol bombs. Basically, a Netflix series nobody asked for, but everyone's somehow starring in. History gives us a warm, comforting preview. Early Northern Ireland wasn't tanks rolling through cities. It was homes burnt, communities segregated, invisible borders forming street by street, and local muscle replacing the state. Authority didn't collapse overnight. It just quietly packed its bags and left certain postcodes behind. Fast forward to modern Britain, where communities increasingly live next to each other but not with each other. Cultural clustering, mutual suspicion, parallel social worlds, everyone sharing the same postcode but not the same reality. In the worst case version, local strongmen replace local councillors, intimidation replaces community meetings, and the police become referees in a game nobody agrees on the rules for. Even better, if you get mirrored radicalisation, one side retreats inward, the other side doubles down on angry nationalism. Everyone feels besieged, everyone feels righteous, nobody feels responsible. It's like Twitter, but with bricks. If this thing ever escalates, don't expect dramatic battles. Expect grind, arson, small explosive devices, targeted harassment, endless disruption designed not to win anything, but to exhaust everyone emotionally, financially, and politically. The goal isn't victory, it's attrition. It's making normal life quietly impossible, while institutions pretend it's just isolated incidents. And here's the real accelerant, disenfranchisement. When people feel ignored, talked down to, locked out of real political influence, or permanently morally judged, some eventually decide ballots are decorative and shouting doesn't work. History shows this movie ends badly every single time. The trailer alone should be enough. The cherry on top? Nobody seems remotely prepared. There's no serious national conversation about preventing fragmentation, rebuilding trust, or reinforcing shared civic identity. The strategy appears to be cross fingers, issue press releases, and hope everyone stays polite while boiling. Which is bold, admirable delusion, almost artistic. The danger isn't that Britain suddenly explodes into civil war tomorrow morning before the kettle boils. The danger is slow decay, normalising tension, accepting small violence, shrugging at segregation, letting temporary emergency measures quietly become permanent. Civil conflict rarely announces itself with trumpets. It creeps in through mistrust, boredom, resentment, and growing sense that the system doesn't belong to anyone anymore. Once that line is crossed, history suggests there's no easy reset button. And Britain isn't exactly known for reading the warning label before drinking the bottle. So naturally, when societies start wobbling, governments respond by doing what they do best, panicking in expensive suits and inventing new ways to punish people without the inconvenience of courts. Welcome to modern Europe, where rule of law is spoken consistently while quietly placed in administrative witness protection. Sanctions, wrongthink, frozen bank accounts, and surprise consequences. Let's take a look at how disagreement became a lifestyle risk. Welcome to modern Europe, where everyone keeps chanting rule of law like a meditation mantra while quietly speed running the greatest legal plot twist since the Middle Ages. Same values, new packaging, fewer pesky trials. Across the continent, punishment has discovered a convenient shortcut. Instead of messy courtrooms, annoying evidence, and those tedious defence lawyers, we now have administrative sanctions. It's like criminal justice, but faster, quieter, and with absolutely no refund policy. One executive decision and suddenly your bank account freezes, your travel vanishes, your landlord panics, and your grocery shopping becomes a thrilling bureaucratic obstacle course. But don't worry, it's all for values. The magic trick here is that punishment arrives first and explanations may be sharp later, if everyone remembers to write them. Evidence, classified. Process, confidential. Accountability, somewhere between trust us and mind your own business. Its governance as shrug emoji. The real star of the show is the word misinformation. Nobody knows what it actually means, but everyone agrees it's very dangerous and must be defeated immediately. The working definition appears to be anything that disagrees with whatever the approved narrative was 5 minutes ago. Yesterday's wrongthink becomes tomorrow's press release and next week's sanction. This is how disagreement quietly graduates into offence. Not fraud, not incitement, not defamation proven in court, just the crime of having the wrong interpretation of reality. Orwell would be furious, but also impressed by the efficiency upgrade. Curiously, governments love routing this punishment through EU mechanisms rather than their own courts. Why? Because domestic systems still have irritating guardrails like judges, appeals, and visible responsibility. EU-level punishment is wonderfully blurry. Nobody quite knows who decided, how they decided, or where exactly you're supposed to complain to when your life gets administratively vaporized. It's not a trial, it's more of a surprise subscription to consequences. And fear spreads beautifully in this environment, not just to the sanctions, but to anyone who might defend them. Careers in academia, media, politics, and civil service thrive on staying uncontroversial. So everyone privately worries, publicly nods, and quietly updates their self-censorship software. Free speech survives mainly among retirees and people who have already been cancelled 3 times and enjoy it. Even better, Europe has rediscovered a collective punishment, the ancient art of blaming entire groups for existing incorrectly. Cultural bans, exclusions, suspicious by identity. It's moral outrage mixed with medieval logic, strategically brilliant if your goal is to harden enemies, poison diplomacy, and make compromise politically radioactive. Meanwhile, Europe lectures the world about law, rights, and democracy while practicing executive punishment at home. Unsurprisingly, the rest of the planet notices. Nothing screams credibility like selective principles. The deeper issue is decline psychologically. When societies feel economically strained, politically fragmented, and strategically insecure, elites reach for control instead of consent. Sanctions are fast, dramatic, and emotionally satisfying. Courts are slow and boring. Panic always wins the popularity contest, but every shortcut around due process quietly erodes the institutions meant to prevent exactly this kind of panic-driven governance. Europe isn't unravelling because one sanction or one controversy. It's unravelling because punishment without transparency is becoming normal. And once wrong think becomes actionable, everyone eventually becomes guilty of thinking. Okay, now let's export all that dysfunction internationally, because nothing fixes domestic problems like blowing something up overseas and calling it accountability. Caracas just experienced a lightning raid that was absolutely, definitely, totally not about oil, while standing directly on top of oil. We've got sovereignty, legal gymnastics, regime messaging, and resource politics all wrapped into one very loud reminder that international law is now mostly decorative. So let's unpack what really happened and what it signals for everyone else. So welcome to 2026, where diplomacy now comes with flashbangs. International law is more of a vibe than a rulebook, and law enforcement operation apparently means airborne kidnapping with a side of geopolitics. Early January delivered Caracas a lightning raid that removed Venezuela's head of state faster than a Western government deletes inconvenient emails. Officially, this was all about justice, narco-terrorism, accountability, and the very serious paperwork. Unofficially, everyone on planet immediately noticed the oil sitting under the table, waving politely. Because nothing says this is definitely not about resources like deploying military hardware instead of sending a subpoena. The operation itself was weirdly surgical and suspiciously lopsided. Heavy casualties on the ground, civilians caught in the blast radius, almost no visible losses on the attacking side, and perhaps most curious of all, Venezuela's much advertised air defense suddenly developed the same response time as a British train service. Two explanations emerged. One, betrayal. Someone inside hit the snooze button on national defense. Two, disruption. Communications knocked out, command systems scrambled, and decision makers forced to choose between blind retaliation or absorbing the hit to avoid turning Caracas into a concrete smoothie. Neither option screams stable global order. The regime didn't collapse. That's the part nobody celebrating seems to mention. The institutions stayed intact. The political machine kept running. The state didn't flip like a monopoly board. Which means, congratulations, a dramatic raid removed a man, not a system. That's not regime change. That's a very expensive message delivery service. So what's left? Negotiate, occupy, or destabilize? Negotiation is cheapest. Occupation is politically radioactive. Destabilization is messy, slow, and excellent for producing refugees, headlines, and long-term regret. History strongly suggests Western governments will confidently pick the option that causes the most unintended consequences. Then comes the deals. Prison releases magically rebranded as humanitarian gestures, because geopolitics always improves when you sprinkle fairy dust on bargaining chips. Oil frameworks quietly float back into the conversation. Revenue controls, conditional spending, opaque financial plumbing, all the greatest hits of trust us. This will definitely end well. Energy is the real prize. Venezuela offers oil. Washington offers sanctions relief and fewer explosions. But when negotiations drift into please realign your entire foreign policy while under pressure, talks usually end in awkward silence and passive-aggressive press releases. The legal side is where things get spicy. Dragging a foreign head of state into a domestic court detonates about 70 years of international norms. Immunity, optional. Jurisdiction, flexible. Evidence standards, trust the process, citizen. The narco-terror framework does a lot of heavy lifting here, powered largely by witnesses who suddenly remember everything once leniency enters the chat. And here's the awkward part. If a real trial ever peeled back the old intelligence relationships, covert logistics, or inconvenient Cold War leftovers, a lot of more than Caracas might get uncomfortable. Funny how transparency always seems to develop selective blindness. Regionally, everyone got the message, aligning correctly, and things get quite loud quickly. This isn't about Venezuela. It's a hemispheric reminder that sovereignty now comes with terms and conditions. The real danger? Once flashy raids look successful, they become politically addictive until one goes sideways and suddenly everyone remembers why international law exists in the first place. Caracas wasn't just a raid. It was a stress test of rules, power and pretense, and the results suggest the mask is slipping, not quietly, but with the rotor blades. And finally, because tonight apparently needed a nuclear-grade ending, we arrive at intelligence leaks, alleged betrayals, and enough shadow activity to make a spy novelist file for royalties. If you thought Caracas was spicy, wait until we get into nuclear deterrence and who might quietly be poking it with a stick. Sleep is optional after this segment. Welcome to the part of geopolitics where reality stops wearing seatbelts and common sense gets thrown out of the moving aircraft. In the murky swamp of global power politics, where alliances last as long as a politician's apology, a spicy little narrative has detonated, according to leaks, whispers, anonymous briefings, and the usual shadow-dwelling keyboard ninjas. The CIA may have orchestrated a covert strike on nuclear triad, allegedly with Donald Trump playing either the role of useful idiot or an enthusiastic middleman, because of course he did. This isn't your standard late-night conspiracy with corkboards and red string. This is a premium industrial-grade paranoia package, deception, power projection, strategic arrogance, and just enough plausible deniability to keep everyone pretending nothing happened while nervously checking their bunker insurance policies. The setup reads like a bad spy thriller. Trump, forever cosplaying as the world's greatest deal maker, allegedly reached out to Putin under the banner of peace, stability, dialogue, and all the other words politicians use when they're sharpening knives behind their backs. Ukraine, energy, historic summits, big smiles, firm handshakes, the usual theatre. But according to the leaks, the conversation wasn't about peace at all. It was allegedly about harvesting timing, movement patterns, and operational rhythms. Think less, let's make a deal, and more, smile for the satellite. Iran learned this lesson the hard way when Soleimani got introduced to a drone faster than you can say miscommunication. Then comes the alleged fireworks. Strange explosions near missile installations in Siberia, submarine tracking mysteriously going blind in the Barents Sea, a strategic bomber apparently vanishing like a Netflix series after season 2, even whispers of drone swarms slipping through the cracks like caffeinated mosquitoes, allegedly a subtle attempt on Putin himself via a toxin-laced diplomatic gift, because nothing says friendship like surprise poisoning. The message, if true, wasn't subtle. It wasn't about destruction. It was about reminding Moscow who can still flip the chessboard when negotiations get boring. Which raises the awkward question, why would Russia trust any of this circus in the first place? NATO promises evaporated, agreements shredded, red lines treated like optional suggestions. Meanwhile, China quietly operates on the principle of trust nobody, verify everything, retaliate immediately. No hugs, no illusions, no Nobel Peace Prize fantasies. Putin's lingering belief in rational dialogue now looks less like statesmanship and more like wishful thinking in a wolf enclosure. Online critics are now already sharpening the memes. Even if a fraction of this narrative is true, the lesson is brutally simple. Stop believing the West negotiates in good faith. It negotiates in PowerPoint slides and covert budgets. Honour isn't policy. Leverage is. Diplomacy has become camouflage. Negotiations is now a targeting phase with better catering. The age of gentlemen's agreements is dead and buried under classified folders and corporate lobbying. So buckle up. The shadow war isn't cooling down. It's warming up, stretching, and checking its weapons. Sleep well. Well, that concludes tonight's emotional damage report. If you feel slightly unsettled, mildly entertained, and quietly questioning everything, congratulations, the show worked. Remember to like, share, subscribe, tell a friend, confuse an enemy, and absolutely do not attempt to fact-check this episode while operating heavy machinery. We'll be back soon with more sarcasm, more geopolitics, and more things you weren't supposed to notice. Good night, and may your infrastructure function better than your government. Bye.